Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining this side event of the High-Level Political Forum. We're still waiting for a few people to connect, and so if I could just ask you for a little bit of patience. We'll start very soon. Thank you.
A very warm welcome to all. Before we begin, we kindly request your attention to go over some video conferencing rules. French interpretation is available. Please choose your language channel. If you have any questions, please use the chat function. Please note that you can type your questions and comments in French. Please raise your hand if you would like to indicate that you would like to speak by clicking raise hand in the participant section. I now invite Mr. Thomas Gass to kindly take the floor. Thank you. Mr. Gass, you're on. Thank you.
Yeah. So, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, my name is Thomas Gass. I'm the Assistant Director General at the Swiss Agency for Development Cooperation and currently the co-chair of the Global Partnership on Effective Development Cooperation. And it's a great pleasure and an honor to welcome you to this panel discussion on the role of effective partnerships for leaving no one behind, and in studying how effective partnerships can amplify the COVID-19 recovery, particularly in least developed countries. As you know, LDCs development progress has been slowed by the impact of COVID-19, with many countries forced to divert funding from long-term development priorities. This has ultimately increased public debt, strained limited public resources, and hindered progress towards the 2030 agenda and the effort to ensure that no one is left behind. This panel discussion is happening during the high-level political forum and also in advance of the 5th United Nations Conference on the Least Developed Countries. And I'm very pleased to acknowledge the partnership with the High Representative, the Office of the High Representative for the Least Developed Countries, landlocked developing countries, and small island developing states, OHRLLS. And thank you for organizing this event together with the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation. We have a number of very interesting speakers today. I believe I'm going to have to take the guidance also of our secretariat, but I believe that we will have today as a speaker the Secretary General of the Ministry of Planning of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Mr. Daniel Pembe Mozango. He was not yet with us a few minutes ago, so I'm going to ask for a signal when he will join us. And then we also have, and we will start with the opening remarks of Ms. Heidi Schroeder-Fox, who is the director of the Office of the High Representative for the Least Developed Countries, landlocked developing countries, and small island development states. It's a great privilege to have you with us, Ms. Schroeder-Fox. Dear Heidi, I have best memories of working with you at the UN, and it's really great to welcome you here and ask you to give your opening remarks.
Thank you so much, dear Excellency, dear colleague Thomas Gass. Such a pleasure to see you. Really nice, warm welcome, warm regards here from an early New York morning to you and everybody on this line. Excellency Christian Simba, dear colleagues and distinguished representatives, it's a pleasure for me to be here this morning. And I would like to thank you very much, and thank you to Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation for co-organizing this very, very important and timely meeting. And as you have mentioned, we are now only a few months away from the 5th UN conference on the LDCs, the so-called LDC 5 conference, which will take place in January of 2022 in Doha, Qatar. And this is, of course, a UN-wide heads of state and government level conference that is organized every 10 years. And it is for the whole international community to really look into the issues of the least developed countries, take stock of where we are, what we have achieved in support of the LDCs in the past 10 years during the Istanbul Program of Action, and what are some of the unfinished business of Istanbul, and what are some new ideas and concrete ideas to really support the LDCs to graduate out of the LDC category within the next 10 years program. So this conference takes very much, comes at a time when the LDCs are reeling from cascading health, social, economic, and climate crises. These crises have reversed progress made on poverty eradication, education, health, debt sustainability, and access to finance. And as a result, the LDCs have seen sharp declines in export revenue, in FDI, and in remittances. So the financing gap to achieve the SDGs in LDCs is estimated to have doubled in 2020. The LDC 5 conference will adopt a new 10-year program of action for the LDCs, coinciding with the SDGs Decade of Action. So building coherence with the two agendas will be crucial. Through this, we have a huge opportunity to swift the trajectory of LDCs and recover lost ground, and development cooperation will play a critical role. Official development assistance in LDCs makes up a larger share of financing mix than any other country group. In 2018, ODA made up 5.1% of GDP and around 40% of government spending in LDCs. However, the share of total ODA from DAC donors to LDCs declined from 33% in 2011 to 30% in 2019. The percentage of ODA to LDCs in the form of grants declined from about 93% in 2015 to 90% in 2018. So these are negative trends, and we really think these trends must be reversed. Developed countries and other development partners must increase grants and concessional finance to LDCs to safeguard hard-won progress on the SDGs. DAC donors should meet the long-standing ODA goal of providing more than 0.20% of their gross national income, or at least 50% of the net ODA, to the LDCs. There are very few countries at the moment who do this. The quality of development cooperation should also be further improved, including through the use of country systems and enhanced predictability. The pandemic has exacerbated the debt situation in LDCs, even pushing some to default. The OECD estimates that the low-income countries, an additional 6% of GDP would need to be addressed at the COVID crisis. A long-term solution to the debt situation is urgently needed, building on progress already achieved on the debt service suspension initiative and the common framework for debt treatments. The LDC5 conference must not only agree on actions, but very importantly, we also need the means of implementation. We must agree on concrete measures on development cooperation to support the LDCs recover from the COVID-19 pandemic and build back better. In only 10 days' time, member states will start negotiations on the draft outcome document for LDC5. And as a starting point for the negotiations, the co-chairs of the Bureau of the Preparatory Committee, the ambassadors of Bangladesh and the ambassador of Canada have circulated to member states a zero draft of the outcome document. We also have during the conference very important partnership platforms, as we are convening, in addition to the intergovernmental platform, also meetings for the youth, private sector, NGOs, parliaments, and South-South cooperation. So the ball is very much rolling now, and for our part, as the Secretariat, we are fully committed in close partnership with the host government of Qatar to ensuring the best possible outcome for LDCs for the next decade. But the success of the conference depends critically on maintaining and strengthening the true spirit of cooperation between nations that we have already seen in these most unprecedented times. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Schroeder-Fox. Thank you for really placing the issue in the center, reminding us that although ODA is such an important part of the government spending in LDCs, many of the development partners are not on track and are not holding up their end of the bargain in terms of the part of their own ODA that should be going to LDCs. But you also reminded us so rightly that it's not just about quantity, it's also about quality. Thank you also for introducing the process that is going to lead to the outcome document. And I'm very pleased, excited to say that we actually have a high-level representative of Bangladesh and Canada on this panel that are going to speak later on. And so we'll be looking forward to hearing how things are going in this regard. As you said, this is a conference that only happens every 10 years. and it really has to set the bar in a way that then sets a trend that moves countries in the right direction. Thank you so much. I'm pleased to say that we have now been joined by Daniel Pembe Mozango, Secretary General of the Ministry of Planning of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Monsieur le Secrétaire Général Pembe Mozango, bienvenue parmi nous aujourd'hui. Nous nous réjouissons que vous soyez ici en représentation du ministre Mwando Nzimba, le ministre du Plan, qui est également co-président du partenariat mondial pour l'efficacité de la coopération au développement. Monsieur Pembe, vous avez la parole. Je me réjouis de vous entendre.
Merci beaucoup, Excellence. Merci, très chers leurs Excellences, Monsieur le Co-président, Mesdames et Messieurs, à vos titres et qualités respectifs. Au nom de son Excellence, Monsieur le ministre d'État, ministre du Plan de la République démocratique du Congo et co-président du partenariat mondial, je vous remercie de vous être joints à nous. C'est un réel plaisir de nous retrouver aujourd'hui à cette réunion virtuelle consacrée à une réflexion sur la manière dont le partenariat efficace et inclusif peut amplifier la réponse et le redressement de la COVID-19 dans les pays les moins avancés au cours de la décennie d'action afin de garantir que personne ne soit laissé pour compte. En effet, le forum politique de haut niveau est la principale arène des Nations Unies pour les questions du développement durable. À cet effet, il joue un rôle central dans le suivi et l'examen de nos efforts collectifs en faveur de l'agenda 2030. À l'instar du partenariat mondial pour une coopération efficace au service du développement, qui est le principal cadre multipartite pour l'efficacité du développement selon les principes convaincus par tous, appropriation par les pays, partenariat inclusif, accent mis sur les résultats, responsabilité mutuelle et transparence. Ce forum est volontaire par nature et constitue un espace consacré à l'apprentissage et au partage d'expériences sur la manière dont nous pouvons travailler ensemble sur la base de principes et de données probantes afin de transformer notre monde pour le meilleur. Un meilleur panel d'intervenants est réuni à ce jour pour écouter les différentes interventions à ce sujet. Son Excellence, Monsieur Thomas Gass de la Suisse et coprésident du partenariat mondial, nous guidera dans notre programme avec son aplomb habituel. D'éminents panélistes d'Afghanistan, du Bangladesh et du Rwanda nous feront part de leurs expériences et de l'impact de la pandémie sur les efforts de développement national et de la manière dont ils réagissent et dont s'appuient sur le travail du partenariat mondial. Monsieur Yann Mitchell du Centre for Global Development de Londres nous fera part de ses analyses sur les tendances de l'aide, sur la manière dont les partenaires peuvent faire mieux et sur que cela pourrait signifier pour le groupe des pays les moins avancés. Au-delà de ce large accueil, je demanderai votre indulgence en me permettant de vous laisser sur 3 brefs messages. Le groupe des pays les moins avancés, notre statut en tant que tel et le défi particulier auquel nous sommes confrontés est plus important que jamais. Nous constatons sans cesse au sein de sociétés, mais aussi entre elles, que ce sont les personnes déjà les plus vulnérables qui ressentent le plus d'impact de la pandémie et qui ressentent de plus en plus le plus longtemps possible. Il est essentiel d'attirer l'attention sur ce point et de demander à nos partenaires de travailler avec nous pour gérer ce risque. Et nous espérons que la 5e conférence des Nations Unies sur les pays les moins avancés pourra faire de même. Les principes d'efficacité, une fois encore, l'appropriation par les pays, les partenariats inclusifs, l'accent mis sur les résultats, la responsabilité mutuelle et la transparence sont un moyen de garantir des partenariats de développement plus égaux et plus autonomes pour des résultats plus durables. C'est pourquoi ils sont importants pour nous en tant que membres du groupe des pays les moins avancés et ils devraient pour autant être pour vous. Enfin, nous espérons que vous vous joindrez à l'initiative des dialogues d'action du partenariat mondial qui rassemble divers et différents types de partenaires pour se concentrer sur des questions d'efficacité de développement au niveau national afin de garantir une approche inclusive et des résultats durables. Nous espérons que vous vous joindrez à nous dans cette entreprise car une approche plus inclusive nous permettra de mieux discerner les besoins et nous assurer que nous ne laissons personne de côté dans notre reprise. Au nom de son Excellence, Monsieur le ministre d'État, ministre du Plan de la République démocratique du Congo et coprésident du Partenariat mondial, je vous remercie de vous être joint à nous. Je vous souhaite également une bonne et fructueuse réunion. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, Excellence. Thank you, Excellency, for placing the most vulnerable also at the center of this discussion and reminding us that if we are to alleviate the suffering, if we are to reverse the decline that is happening in a number of countries, there needs to be an active partnership in order to address this. And this partnership has to be based on principles. You reminded them: country ownership, results focus, inclusive partnerships, and mutual accountability. Thank you so much also for reminding that a number of countries are engaged in mobilizing the different partners, the different stakeholders at the national level to address this issue. And we hope to hear a little more about this during today's panel. It's now my pleasure to invite Mr. Ian Mitchell, the co-director of Development Cooperation in Europe and Senior Policy Fellow at the Center for Development, to give us a presentation based on the evidence collected through the global partnership. Mr. Mitchell, you have the floor.
Great, thank you, Thomas. Hello, everybody. As has been said, I'm Ian Mitchell. I'm at the Centre for Global Development. So we're a think tank that's based in Washington and London that seeks to improve lives through economic research and policy solutions. But our focus is on the institutions and issues that are critical. And my particular role in this session and in the partnership more generally, I think, is to scrutinise providers of development finance and to challenge them on their performance. So that's what I'm going to be talking about just now. I have got a few slides, but I will move through them quickly. Be reassured. And they should be, there we go. So I think we've heard a little bit already about the story on quantity, but I'll touch on development finance quantity before. But I think it's clear that we also need to focus on quality and what's happened with that. So we produce a tool called the Quality of ODA. So I'll briefly introduce that. And then I'll look back over the last 10 years since the Busan Agreement to see what we can learn from this quantitative analysis on the wider trends on quality of ODA and effectiveness. But before we delve too deeply into ODA, official development assistance, I just wanted to have a footnote that the other sources of finance for development that are still concessional and still cross-border go beyond DAC members. So we produce a measure annually now called Finance for International Development. And in our latest figures, a sixth of Finance for Development, 26 billion in 2018, was provided outside of DAC members. And you can get a flavour of that here. So there isn't the data and the granularity to look at that in the same way that we look at ODA. But I'd hope that the providers of that finance can move towards common platforms, even if it's not at the DAC, to help us look in more detail at that, because it's becoming increasingly important. I think we've touched on this already, but the Istanbul, looking at the quantity, especially for LDCs, there's a reasonably clear story. There has been some progress towards the Istanbul target. The red line shows for DAC providers a slight increase over the last 10 years, but only 5 met it in the last year, and I'm pretty sure the UK will drop out of that 5 when we have the latest figures. So much for quantity. Let's move on to quality. So we produced the Quality of ODA, QODA, which is a quantitative assessment of 49 providers. So it's 29 countries and 20 multilaterals. It's the 5th time that we've done this, and this is the first time we've significantly revised the framework. And it's all based on the evidence about what matters to effectiveness. So we have a long working paper if you're interested on why we've picked the areas and indicators we have. The ultimate goal is to start a conversation with providers and partners about improvements. So it's to start that conversation. We look at 4 dimensions. They align pretty well with the Gpedc's principles, but are a bit different because the information available is different. So we look at prioritization, which is whether providers are making their ODA allocations where it's needed most. ownership, which is based entirely on the Gpedc survey of partners, transparency and untying, which looks at how open countries are, both in the information that they provide and in whether it's tied to national contracts in its provision. And we also look at evaluation systems and the quality of those. So I will briefly touch on Quota's findings, but it's a very rich framework. I'm not going to talk through all of these indicators, but if you have the slides afterwards, they're all there for reference. So these are the rankings of the top 25 providers. So there are a few stories that are worth noting here. So the top 5 spots are all taken by multilaterals. They tend to be better at prioritization and at ownership, and are at least equally good on transparency on the whole. It's worth highlighting the best bilaterals as well. So Sweden, Finland, Denmark, Canada and Belgium scored best. And also worth noting that within the different dimensions, there are different leaders. So Gavi are the strongest at prioritization in our view, Asian Development Bank on ownership, IFAD on transparency, and Sweden do best on evaluation. So there's lessons for most providers in here, even the top ones, on where they can improve. But I won't talk more about that today. You can look at the website if you're interested in exploring those. What I'm going to focus on instead is what's happened in the last 10 years on effectiveness. So I probably won't need to tell most people on the call that the BOSAN partnership was agreed almost 10 years ago. It set the principles that form the basis of GPDC. So within our framework, I'm going to look at 3 of our themes and selected indicators to see what's happening overall. So prioritization is the first. So these are 2 of our indicators. The left panel looks at what share of ODA is actually making it out of provider countries and beyond admin. So how much ODA is actually reaching recipient countries. So the central solid blue line shows that there hasn't been much change since 2011. Arguably it's down since a little bit before that, but it's basically flat. You can see the multilaterals do better, as you'd expect. They're dotted cream line, higher than bilaterals. So there's no increase in the share of ODA going to recipients. In the right-hand panel, we look at the average income level of recipients in the top lines. And we can see that's going up. Perhaps you might expect that because there's been some growth over this period. And the LDC figure is shown below that. But even though the LDC line has maybe gone up more quickly than the average of recipients, you can still see there's a big gap, that the average recipient has income twice the level of the LDC. And we see that reflected in the indicators of allocation we've already spoken about. The other prioritization indicator we have looks at whether under-aided countries are receiving as much as they should. Again, that's most meaningful at the provider level, but just to give you the overview, most models or different ways of doing this analysis suggest over half of global aid should be going to LDCs, but actually it's 44% in 2018. So there's 13 percentage points of global aid that isn't being allocated where it's needed most. So ownership is the first GPDC principle, and I think many people feel the most important. So the Gpedc survey is critical for this, but it's also patchy. But we've put together here the trends in the indicators that we look at over the period for which they exist, and you can study this at your leisure. But I think the takeaway is there's no transformation here. I mean, there's some improvement, there's some deterioration, but not a step change. The other thing we spent a lot of time looking at is across our measures and across the measures of indicators in Gpedc, in the countries that respond that are fragile, there is not a lower level of ownership reported. So for providers often make the argument that we can't expect to use country systems, or we can't be more predictable in fragile states because of the wider circumstances. But that's not what we see in the recipients' responses to providers in fragile countries. They are more positive about providers in fragile states, in fact. So transparency is one area where I think we do see clear improvements. We look at the quality of reporting, and IATI membership, the International Aid Transparency Initiative, has clearly grown over the last decade, not just in terms of the number of countries and providers that are signed up, which has gone up from 21 to 33, but also in terms of the quality of the information that's there. We've looked in detail at that. So that is a clear area of improvement. I'll be interested to hearing from panelists whether that has helped them be more effective in partner countries. On the face of it, untying ODA also looks better. Providers' official estimates of how much they tie has gone down, so the untied share has gone up. That's true overall as well as for LDCs. But we do some new calculations in Quota to look at how much for each provider is allocated to a country, to a contractor that is not in your own country. And the answer is over half goes to a national provider, which I think is incredible. I mean, we're talking about international projects in another country. Can it really be the case that half the time the best person to do that is a contractor in the country providing the finance? I think that's implausible. And I think there's more work that's needed on that and more progress that needs to be made. So let me just sum up and then I'll hand back to Mr. Gass. So we've seen the story on quantity, it's growing slowly. And so the emphasis on quality remains key, especially in COVID. For Quota, the multilaterals do dominate the top of the rankings. The bilaterals have a lot of room for improvement on prioritization and on the ownership reported from their partners. The trends from Busan are reasonably flat, some progress on transparency, but otherwise not really any clear improvements on our indicators. So where does this leave the discussions? For me, I think there are three areas. So I think, you know, the trend for finance at the moment is to be focused on climate finance particularly, and COVID, and I think we need to find ways to make sure that those leave no one behind, because the climate finance tendency is not to focus on the poorest and to focus on mitigation instead of adaptation. So that's a challenge. I think ownership still needs serious attention. I would ask that the Gpedc continues its survey, that providers and partners support it, and that we get a better response rate and we don't change the questions too much, so that we can track that over time. And then in terms of the 10 years after Busan, I think we need providers to agree more concrete goals. I mean, I think that the broadening of the partnership was a good thing, but it's meant that the traditional providers, if you like, haven't had concrete goals to live up to, and as we can see, there hasn't really been any progress, at least as far as our indicators. So that's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mitchell. Sometimes when you get up in the morning, you see the mirror and you don't like so much what you see. Well, you've been holding this very sobering mirror to the partnership, to the developing partners. And I think it's important that we take that and at face value and also take on board some of these findings that remind us that where, despite there's already 10 years since Busan, there has not been much progress on some of the really key issues that we felt at that time would be central to making progress. At that time against the MDGs, but today against the SDGs, it's the same principles, the same issues. We're now going to hear from three high-level representatives from countries that are dealing with this on a daily basis, and I'm very honored to introduce our panelists. We're going to have Mr. Gerald Mugabe, Acting Director General, External Finance Directorate, the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning of the Republic of Rwanda. Then we're going to have Mr. Farid Aziz, Wing Secretary, Economic Relations Division at the Ministry of Finance in Bangladesh. And we're going to have Mr. Yassin Zazai, Senior Aid Coordination Specialist at the Aid Management Directorate, Ministry of Finance, Afghanistan. So three countries that are very different, but in their own ways have to be dealing with these multiple challenges that Mr. Mitchell also alluded to, and Madam Schroeder-Fox earlier on. On the one hand, moving the dial on the sustainable development while having to tackle huge challenges related to COVID, to climate change and others. So I'm going to give each one of these panelists the floor briefly for 5 minutes to present the way they have been mobilizing the forces in their own country to make sure that the partnership on the ground actually moves forward and makes a difference. And so it's my pleasure to first give the floor to Mr. Gerald Mugabe. You have the floor.
Yeah, thank you so much, Thomas, and all the members here for inviting us in this important forum. In Rwanda, we have we work with different development partners, and we have a policy that is guiding us. We have what we call Rwanda Aid Policy, and it's the main framework that guides our cooperation with different development partners that we have. And this policy emphasizes the key principles that all the different speakers have already mentioned here: alignment, accountability, use of country systems. So that's the important framework that we have. But besides that, we have forums that bring dialogue of the different actors with the government. We have what we call Development Partners Retreat, which is chaired by the Minister of Finance and Economic Planning. And this is for strategic dialogue between development partners and the government. It brings government representatives from different ministries, development partners, heads of cooperation, missions, private sector representatives, civil society, local and international. And then we have another one which is a bit technical and convenes every quarter, called Development Partners Coordination Group. And this is important dialogue that helps to bring strategic issues that cannot be discussed at the sector levels, because other specific sector issues are discussed at the sector working groups, and they also have what we call the joint sector reviews, both backward and forward. Backward to review the progress vis-a-vis the targets and the plans that we had, but also the forward-looking in terms of reviewing the plans that we have ahead. So we have other forums like country portfolio performance review, and this is specific with each bilateral and multilateral partner to review the cooperation between us and the specific partner in terms of implementation of the programs and projects we have, but also to look at the challenges and the opportunities that we might be having in that area. So we also have other forums that brings government and the private sector in the dialogue, like public-private dialogue. This brings government and the private sector to discuss about like issues affecting the private sector investment and what could be the role of the government in unlocking and addressing those issues, the areas that private sector is having interest. So I think those are some of the forums that I can say that are important for the case of Rwanda. Okay, I forgot another important forum called Joint Action Development Forum, which is at the decentralized level, at the district level. And this helps to have all the actors at the district level, both government institutions, civil society organizations, private sector, and the partners, to have like a joint forum of how, first of all, they understand the priorities in that specific district, but also how they can participate. So I think briefly that those are some of the blocks and forums that we use in our cooperation with different development partners. Some of them are resident, others are non-resident. And by the way, we want to thank Global Partnership for Economic Cooperation for participating in our last Development Partners Retreat, which was in March this year. And their participation was very important in terms of bringing this experience, global experience, at the country level. So I think those are some of the points that I wanted to mention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mugabe, dear Gerald. Thank you for sharing this. If I can just come back with a question. You also saw the figures we just saw from Mr. Mitchell, who said that there hadn't been really much progress, etc. Now, you just gave us an example of I would say, a quite firmly led coordination process, strongly owned and led by the government at the different levels, in different sectors, at the decentralized. Do you feel that I mean, without maybe, you may not have the data with you, but do you feel that you have been getting better results in terms of alignment, in terms of results focus, in terms of working through government, etc.?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. I think for the case of Rwanda, I can say that most of the partners are aligned with our priorities. Our priorities are defined in our medium-term development strategy called the National Strategy for Transformation 1 and Vision 2050. And those are guiding documents for every development partner to develop, whether it's a country partnership framework, but also for a specific project and program. And we frankly have consultations to see how these projects are going to be aligned with this, our NST1, but also on a specific sector. And in terms of alignment, we have another tool that has helped us over I think it's now 10 years. We have what we call donor division of labor. And in that context, we have agreed with all development partners to have a maximum of 3 sectors of intervention. And this has really been very important in terms of streamlining substantial support for sectors. Before that, we had like each partner is in 10 sectors. But now with the maximum of 3, it reduces transactions and it brings more results, and it gives the focus of development partners' interventions. And so I can proudly say that this partnership has been giving us results. ODA on our national budget has been, over the last 3 to 5 years, has been between 30 to 32% of our national budget. And there are other resources which are not on budget. And so besides that, they also complement what the government is doing. So from our experience, we can say that it is giving results.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for those precisions. I want to move now to another continent and to Bangladesh and ask our Mr. Farid Aziz, the Wing Secretary, the Economic Relations Division, Ministry of Finance, Bangladesh, to tell us how the coordination is happening there in Bangladesh. How do you get the different stakeholders around the table to really invest their efforts and their resources for sustainable development? Over to you, Mr. Aziz.
Thanks, His Excellency, Mr. Thomas Gass.
Good evening from Bangladesh. Glad to meet once again within a week and feeling good to see your happy face. Distinguished participants, good evening. At the outset, I would like to mention that Bangladesh has been playing leading role in the regional efforts as part of the Asia-Pacific Development Effectiveness Facility, as well as have played leadership role in the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation since 2016. Bangladesh signed up to the Paris Principles on Aid Effectiveness in 2005. Bangladesh is also a signatory to the Accra Agenda for Action, which strengthened the commitment of both Government of Bangladesh and development partner to improve aid effectiveness at country level. Furthermore, Bangladesh has been organizing biannual Bangladesh Development Forum involving development partners, CSOs, private sector, trade bodies, academia since 2010, focused on development effectiveness. According to Bangladesh government's allocation of business, the primary role of development partnership management, communication and liaising with development partners for financial and technical assistance on behalf of government is vested in Economic Relations Division. The local consultative group, LCG in Bangladesh, is considered to be a key coordination structure between government and development partners. ERD keeps active engagement with the development partners to promote foreign assistance as per development demand of the country. Commitments received in the last 5 fiscal years amounts 59.61 billion US dollar, which is average 11.92 billion US dollar in each year. At the same time, the disbursement of foreign assistance amounts 27.27 billion US dollar, which averages 5.45 US dollar. The amounts of commitment and disbursements of foreign assistance in the fiscal year 2019 and 20 are 9.798 billion US dollar and 7.382 billion US dollar respectively, which is the highest disbursement in the post-independence period. ERD is striving to collect significant foreign assistance to recover from COVID-19 and to accomplish the investment needs in the social front, including electricity, transportation, physical infrastructure, education, and health. Here in Bangladesh, foreign assistance management systems, a web-based application software developed for intensive monitoring and accelerating the management of foreign assistance. So this software, the overall management and reporting of foreign assistance, including the collection and uses of foreign assistance, monitoring of disbursement, and formulation of annual development plans are being carried out. Distinguished learned participants, perhaps you are aware that Bangladesh has been maintaining macroeconomic stability and rapid development over the last decades under dynamic and pragmatic leadership of our Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. This pace of development in Bangladesh got momentum until the outbreak of COVID-19, emerging as global pandemic. Bangladesh was not exception from the negative fallout of this pandemic. The emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic has interrupted a period of rapid economic growth, underpinning significant advances in terms of poverty reduction, a period of and social development outcomes. The GDP growth slashed from 8.15% in 2019 to 5.24% in 2020. More people are likely to vulnerable categories due to unexpected challenges, which includes people marginally above the poverty level falling below the poverty line due to loss of income and employment during this period. Yet the country has so far weathered the crisis relatively well. The government strategies to combat COVID-19 has always been aimed at striking a careful balance between lives and livelihood. Our priorities were to minimize mortality and morbidity, secure food supply, and protecting jobs. To reduce the impact of coronavirus fallout, the government has offered 23 stimulus packages of 14.62 billion US dollar, which is 4.44% of our GDP. It increased public expenditure and money supply in the economy, widened social safety coverage. Our fiscal policy prioritized funding health and social safety nets, while our monetary and financial policies facilitate adequate liquidity in the banking and monetary system. These packages includes ready-made garment sector, cottage industries, SME, NGO foundation, and disadvantaged people. ERD took all-out efforts to collect foreign assistance to purchase COVID vaccine and for budget support. In the year 2020-21 and 21-22, Bangladesh received 1.2 billion US dollar and 1.18 billion US dollar as budget support, which we are using for to purchase the COVID vaccine. COVID-19 further deepened the financing gap for implementing SDGs and development activities. To tackle the emerging situation and to materialize the concept of leave no one behind, it is overreaching need to articulate the whole of society approach. ERD pursue country ownership, respect to political leadership, country priorities and strategies when deals with development partners and other development actors. COVID has inherent attribute to do work digitally, avoid in-person meetings and presence. Surely it has contributed to the reduction of carbon emission. Most of the tasks at ERD and end done digitally. Now, officials are used to provide service digitally than ever before. Due to COVID crisis, Bangladesh sustainable graduation from LDC category will face additional challenges. In such adversarial situation, graduation recommended country, Bangladesh seeks continuation of LDC specifics, international support measures, ISMS, and additional support after graduation for a certain specific period. Otherwise, IPOA declaration may not be fulfilled. Here, multi-stakeholder dialogue and global partnerships are more relevant to pursue ISMS for graduation or recommended countries. Distinguished participants, COVID-19 has also posed serious challenges to existing working arrangements and required us to be more creative and flexible in how we work with colleagues. And this has featured not just in how we continue our work despite COVID, but in fact, how we respond to the pandemic itself. Through ERD, Bangladesh has been pursuing grants, concessional loans and agreements with multilateral development partners and bilateral development partners like China and Russia to ensure smooth supply of COVID vaccine, PSC. Local initiatives, NGOs, foundations are engaged through consultation process with the government to implement vaccination program and support humanitarian assistance to COVID or marginalized people. Inclusivity of development actors and target groups, use of ICT and database, online cash incentives to the disadvantaged groups, involvement of local bodies and consultations, awareness program have been proven crucial to strengthen effectiveness. Distinguished participants, our thinking is in committing to an action dialogue, bringing together different types of partners to focus on development effectiveness issues so we can ensure an inclusive approach and sustainable outcomes. Two key elements are at the forefront here: convening a variety of partner types so we hear a multitude of voices and have a better chance of discerning where the real needs is for leaving no one behind. And bringing effectiveness issues like country ownership and inclusive partnerships to the discussion on development cooperation and pandemic recovery, because we believe these issues are central to sustainable and broadly owned development efforts. Thank you all, dear participants, for patient hearing. Over to His Excellency Gas.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Aziz. I just have a quick question back to you, because you said how the COVID crisis is forcing your country, but I think this is true for so many countries, to change the arrangements, to be more flexible, etc. At the same time, you said it is important to continue to have multi-stakeholder partnerships. How are you able in these conditions to keep the dialogue going with the different stakeholders, with civil society, with the different development partners in this current context of rebuilding from the COVID crisis?
Thank you, Mr. Gas. Actually, Action Dialogue would be a unique platform to share innovative ideas, experience, and practices of the country level efforts to mitigate the emerging concerns, and to explore path to move forward to achieve the expected outcomes. The Action Dialogue, the development actors and stakeholders will be able to clearly understand and explain the concept, elements, core activities, four principles, thematic action areas and apply in development context, with special importance on development cooperation and pandemic recovery. Then visualize the impact of effectiveness in real life development situation and record data and analyze. Institutionalize monitoring mechanism and gather feedback shared with stakeholders through multi-stakeholder dialogues. Finally, Action Dialogue will lead to a dialogue in a broader aspect to advocate, campaign the strength of whole of society approach and effective partnership to ensure leaving no one behind. And in this context, actually, our Bangladesh Development Forum, Biennial Development Forum, and more importantly, the local consultative group actually play a vital role in this context. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you for also placing the data at the center. I mean, it is true that part of that dialogue between the governments and the different stakeholders has to be around good data. And if we want to leave no one behind, that data has to be sufficiently disaggregated, has to be sufficiently sensitive. And I've noticed that Mr. Gary Shapiro in the chat is making also an offer to support anyone who wants to have more data. I've also noted that Mr. Alessandro Motte had asked a question. I will come back to that question about how parliaments are actually included in these donor or in these development partner coordination mechanisms, and in these dialogues with the countries. But before doing that, I would like to move to another country in Asia, a very important country, and give the floor to Mr. Yassin Zazai, Senior Aid Coordination Specialist at the Aid Management Directorate, Ministry of Finance, Afghanistan. Mr. Zazai, how are things there in Afghanistan? How are you managing to maintain that dialogue with the different development partners and stakeholders in these difficult times? Over to you, Mr. Zazai.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. This is Yassin representing Afghanistan. So we do have different platforms to present the dialogues, or to bring all the international development partners around the table to have dialogues. So first of all, with the multilateral donors, we are having individual portfolio reviews. For example, with the World Bank, we do have annual portfolio reviews, while with the ADB, we are having quarter-based reviews, which are annually, there are 4 quarter reviews conducted. And at the same time, annually with the bilateral donors, we do have development cooperation dialogues, where all the international development partners will have like managing their dialogues there with the government, and all the government entities will be also invited based on the sector engagement there. So now coming into the points of COVID. So since it's a hot topic, so I will start with the COVID as well. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my immense pleasure representing Afghanistan in such an important occasion of the Amplifying COVID-19 recovery in LDCs. Global pandemic from coronavirus brought negative impact on the global economy. Life and livelihood were threatened in every corner of the world. Afghanistan government took all out steps from the very beginning to limit the spread of this virus. However, the COVID-19 stopped the development activities from almost 3 months in 2020 that affected all the infrastructure and construction mega projects with huge financial implication in Afghanistan. As this stoppage brings additional pressure on the construction companies to demobilize their resources, and after the 3 months break, remobilization also took time and needed additional resources. Furthermore, the public fund was reallocated from the development activities to emergency fund to fight against the COVID-19 and its negative social economic impact. The international supply chain was also interrupted by the COVID-19, particularly the closure of the borders with Iran and Pakistan, increased the price in the local market, particularly in the basic food commodities item. The government of Afghanistan built very strong relationship with the donors community through mutual accountability framework that brought the main principles of the aid effectiveness, such as ownership, on-budget financing, and alignment of the aid money with the government priorities such as national priority programs. Additionally, we acknowledge with gratitude the generous assistance we received from the development partners in our fight against the pandemic. To effectively tackle its economic impact by facilitating economic recovery program and to assist in the procurement of vaccines, the government has either had asked for the budget support from the development partners. Particularly in the very first wave, we received $200 million from World Bank and USD 100 million from the Asian Development Bank. Afghan government has given high priority on vaccine procurement and has successfully rolled out mass vaccination program. Briefly, I would add here that in the first wave, Afghanistan received 968,000 doses of vaccine, 700,000 doses in the second wave, and recently we received 3.3 million doses of Johnson & Johnson vaccine from United States of America. It's worth mentioning that for procuring the COVID-19 vaccine, we do have available fund of USD 113 million from the World Bank and USD 50 million from the Asian Development Bank. We established an excellent mechanism to bring all the development partners together through the trust funds such as ARTF, which has more than 30 donors, AITF, more than 5 donors, and also LOTFA, Law and Order Trust Fund, and ANA Trust Fund. These funds created an opportunity to bring all the development partners together to work jointly with the government on the development agenda of the country and use the same system. In this case, no one left behind. Afghanistan is committed and will continue to promote regional collaboration with Central Asia in combating the economic effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. And particularly on action dialogues, I would update you as we had a meeting in the steering committee as well. So I would touch upon that one once again. We drafted the concept note and planning to situate the action dialogues possibly within the Development Cooperation Dialogues 2021, which is planned to be conducted in September or early October. It's on the table of His Excellency, the Minister of Finance. When it's got approved, we will circulate it officially with all the international development partners and relevant line ministries. Afghanistan National Peace and Development Framework 2, or ANPDF2, is a strategic plan for Afghanistan to achieve self-reliance and sustainable development. Our international partners play a significant role through their technical and financial support in this process. The recently conducted Geneva Conference on Afghanistan in 2020 was an important milestone, where the international community and the government of Afghanistan agreed on a mutually renewed long-term commitment towards improving aid effectiveness. Improving coordination and effectiveness of the foreign assistance are vital to the sustainable growth and development of Afghanistan. The annual development cooperation dialogues are currently the main platform to monitor and advance this goal. These dialogues are held annually since 2006. DCDs provide a platform for the government of Afghanistan and the development partners to discuss strategic issues related to each donor portfolio in Afghanistan, present achievements with the development cooperation over the past year, discuss major bottlenecks, challenges, and opportunities, ensure alignment with the government national priority programs, discuss future engagement in the country, and review progress against aid effectiveness commitment, particularly those agreed under the previous GMAF or Geneva Mutual Accountability Framework, which is replaced with APF, Afghanistan Partnership Agreement, or some other mechanisms. These dialogues are held in several meetings format among each bilateral donors, partners, and government relevant agencies, which led by the Ministry of Finance. And the objective of these action dialogues would be presented as now. DCDs is also a dynamic planning tool for the government of Afghanistan to accurately and precisely forecast official development assistance flows and understand the development assistance package available to the country. As such, the DCD form an integral part of the annual budget cycle, helps the government of Afghanistan to deliver on investment priorities defined in the Afghanistan National Priority Programs and ANPDF2. Information collected through DCDs is also used to validate and ensure completeness and accuracy of the data in the development assistance database, inform the budget planning process, and produce the annual development cooperation report. As Bangladesh said that they are having a database for their data bank. So we do have the same like development assistance database from each donor to be recorded. And by the end of these action dialogues, we are publishing a report called DCR. Since we are publishing the important document report annually, so we would very much appreciate the technical assistance from some of the relevant donors. So thank you so much. And in conclusion, let me thank you all once again, and I look forward to a productive discussion today. Over to you, Your Excellency.
Thank you so much, Mr. Zazai, and thank you for showing vividly how crucial this coordination was also and is, but particularly last year in responding to that first wave, which we know was really hard also in Afghanistan, and how you were able to mobilize development partners to quickly react to that. I'm going to open the floor for questions. We've already had one or two comments. If you want to ask questions of the different panelists or also of Mr. Mitchell, who did this presentation at the beginning. But before opening the floor, before reading out the questions, if we have any, I'm going to be monitoring also a little bit the chat. Before doing that, I would like to, I promised you that I would give also the floor to a high representative from Canada, and I'm very delighted to have with us Ms. Megan Watkinson, the Director, International Assistance Policy Coordination of Global Affairs Canada. So if I could give you the floor, Madam Watkinson.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this important discussion today. I really appreciated hearing concrete examples from the panelists of how inclusive partnerships and coordination are really enabling recovery from the pandemic and towards sustainable development more broadly. effective and inclusive partnerships are fundamental elements of Canada's international assistance. We played an active role in the creation of the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation in 2011, and 10 years later, we're really pleased to be part of its steering committee. Canada welcomes the progress made to date on the action dialogues. Really wonderful to hear from Mr. Zizai right now, the process undertaken in Afghanistan over the next number of months on an action dialogue. Really appreciate the geographical diversity of the various action dialogues globally with various LDCs. And in light of COVID-19, we really encourage countries to integrate innovation into their dialogues as a driver for effective development impact and to really support locally driven solutions. For Canada, inclusive and innovative partnerships are central to the implementation of the 2030 Agenda and to development effectiveness. That's why we continue to lead the Gpedc action area on effective triangular cooperation, which recognizes the contemporary development landscape as multi-stakeholder and important to engage all development actors through inclusive partnerships. And we also support the work done through other Gpedc action areas, such as on private sector engagement, which is so important to thinking about financing for development beyond traditional ODA alone, and on country-led development effectiveness of South-South cooperation. So really important discussions happening at the Gpedc. Canada really welcomes this and sees it as so important as we look forward to recovery from the pandemic and towards 2030. And when it comes to our relationships with least developed countries, Canada seeks to be a responsive partner. And we've really focused on facilitating inclusive discussions on how to support a timely and effective response to the pandemic. Since 2020, the Prime Ministers of Canada, Jamaica, alongside the UN Secretary General, have co-convened the Financing for Development in the Era of COVID-19 and Beyond initiative, which has brought together governments, international organizations, civil society, all around the world to sit together and inclusively discuss the financing issues that countries are facing as a result of the pandemic. And we were pleased to have many LDCs join us in that forum to communicate their needs, their challenges, in the context of a COVID recovery and response. We saw this as so important in terms of ownership, as many of the issues that we discussed there have traditionally been focused in fora where LDCs are not included. And we really saw the need to have all voices in this discussion. Canada is also pleased to be co-chairing the Preparatory Bureau for the 5th UN Conference on LDCs alongside Bangladesh. In 2 weeks, the second preparatory committee will outline the process by which LDCs and country partners will come together to develop a new program of action to guide the next 10 years of sustainable development in LDCs. We see this as an opportunity to reflect best practice in development effectiveness and to define a clear direction for LDCs and partners to move forward together along thinking through the various important aid effectiveness considerations that we've been discussing today. And COVID-19, we recognize, has added renewed purpose and urgency to the effectiveness agenda. We know that progress in LDCs has been impacted by COVID-19. We've heard about that from panelists today. And we know that important development funding has had to be diverted away from long-term development priorities. And this is impacting our goals set out towards 2030 and our effort to ensure that no one is left behind. Since the start of the pandemic, Canada has really been seized with finding ways to continue to support the important initiatives previously underway with our developing country partners in line with their development goals while also addressing very real and immediate needs. So again, really putting country ownership and transparency at the forefront, and that inclusive dialogue about understanding what is needed in the immediate term and how do we ensure that we do not divert from the longer term goals. And so Canada will continue to adapt, to innovate its international assistance in order to give us the best chance of moving forward together. So just really happy to be part of this dialogue today and to hear from other panelists and to work together going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Watkinson. I've just had a message that Ms. Schroeder-Fox needs to leave us. I want to ask her one more question though before, if she still is able to respond. I mean, we just heard here from Canada how important it is to bring the LDCs into some of these other fora to speak with a strong voice. And I want to hear you a little bit more, Heidi, on how you're not so much bringing the people, the different issues and countries around the OHRLS table, but how you're going there and where you think there still needs to be a stronger voice for LDCs in some of these other spaces so that we can recover better and build forward. Yes, to you.
Thank you very much, Thomas, for that question. And that's a very crucial question. That is the mandate of my office. And it really is to try and make sure that the UN as a whole delivers, the best possible support and the best possible outcome when it comes to development of LDCs. And how can we do that is absolutely to be vocal at every single forum. There are so many crucial questions that are there when we are discussing financing for development, debt relief. How do we, there are important discussions at the UN at the moment on how do we define vulnerability and what constitutes this multi-dimensional vulnerability, and how should that be taken into consideration when aid is provided or when financing opportunities are provided. Climate change. There are, when we are discussing trade and trade opportunities, how can we make sure that we build the productive capacities of LDCs, that as they are building their businesses, there is value added to the businesses and so on. So the field is vast, so we need everybody. And our advocacy is not only to be there at every fora, but really to advocate towards you and towards everybody who is here of the importance of being vocal about the needs of the LDCs. LDC conference is one important opportunity. It's important because it's attended by all member states of the UN at the highest level. All international organizations will be there and together. So that opportunity is important, but it goes way beyond that. And all UN organizations of the development pillar and beyond, because as was discussed also by our colleague from Afghanistan, you know, the relationship between development and crisis and how to build after conflict. Many of the LDCs are also conflict-prone countries, so building these bridges is very important. But let's take the opportunity of LDC 5 and really come there with new initiatives, not just a political declaration, but also new concrete initiatives are very important. And I'm really maybe putting the question to you as well. So when the development partners are coming to Doha, what will you bring with you for the LDCs? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for joining us. And I mean, we're already getting soon towards the end of the session, but I want to come back to our panelists. I don't see more questions here, but I want to build on some of the questions that were, I don't know, maybe there's one now. I want to come back to a question that was asked before about the involvement of parliamentarians, the involvement of local representatives as well in these processes. And maybe I can give the floor first to you, Gerald Mugabe, and then go on back to Mr. Aziz and to Mr. Zazai to give us like some final words, some in a gist of what you want to convey to the participants in terms of the centrality of development effectiveness and where you think we could make a difference in making ODA even more effective. First, let's start with you, Mr. Mugabe. Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Thomas. Yeah, in terms of parliamentary participation, first of all, in the retreat that I mentioned, we normally invite the parliament. It's not always, but sometimes they participate. But also, depending on the forum, there are some which are very technical, but between government institutions and the parliament, there is that close meetings and consultations. But the parliament, the level of engagement, for example, because for us in Rwanda, we have the district level, they have their council, which is like equivalent of the parliament. And they participate in the Joint Development Action Forum that I mentioned, which brings all the different stakeholders like government institutions, development partners, civil society, private sector, but also for at the national level, in the budget process, for example, we present the budget at the different levels to the parliament, at the parliamentary commissions and the plenary. And most of these sessions are live. The public is following, and different people can participate in terms of raising specific concerns, or they can raise them before even they can give them to the parliamentarians if they want to ask specific questions. So that's how I can say that the parliament is involved in this dialogue. But this forum that I mentioned on the public-private dialogue, sometimes the parliament participates.
Thank you very much. I think what I retain from what you said as well is how actually achieving the SDGs means that we have to make the sustainable development a social contract with the people. No, you have to involve the people in the dialogues through their different representatives, through civil society. I think it's very strong what you've been saying there. I want to move now quickly to Mr. Aziz from Bangladesh. Any last words you would like to say in terms of, moving the dial on development cooperation effectiveness? What do we need to do to move forward? You have the floor.
Thanks, Mr. Gas. I think that all our concern already addressed, but we really think that the Action Dialogue is a good platform, is a very effective platform for understanding and also for carry forward all the issues with the development partners. And due to COVID crisis, our Bangladesh Sustainable Graduation from LDC category will be hampered and additionally challenged. So we need to address this type of LDC countries so that they can be, after the graduation, they will not slip back. And we really, and about the COVID vaccine, we need to actually provide the COVID vaccine to all. And we need to actually advocate the COVID vaccine as a global product, what our Honorable Prime Minister already mentioned in different platforms, that COVID vaccine should be a global product and it need to provide it to everybody. With these few words, and also we will happy to see in different platform all of you, and we will continue this platform as a vibrant platform. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Aziz. And then final words from Mr. Zazai. What would you like us to take home in terms of moving the dial on development effectiveness?
Thank you, Your Excellency. As I've said, that we are having different dialogues. So we are having two mechanisms. One is called on-budget mechanism, which is to be through our national budget. And the second one is called off-budget mechanism, where mostly the parliament is not involved, but the parliamentary involvement is only in our on-budget mechanism, or the funds which are channeling through our own budget and treasury. So then our budget, before the approval, it would be addressed to our parliament for their approval, and then at the mid-year review for the mutual accountability, we are going to report to them that what is the status of each project at each community level. But let me mention that within the off-budget projects, except the government entities and line ministries, we do involve the local government through the community development councils, so that they can also be involved and they can report on their audits and how we can add their priority projects within the government national priority programs. So this is all works as here in Afghanistan. And as of the question that how we have prepared in such a hard time for the development cooperation dialogues last year or in the upcoming years, we are using mostly through virtual platform, as we had the development cooperation, government to government negotiations with Germany on 29th of June, where it was virtual, but all the government stakeholders were there connected from their own offices, and they were there for almost 3 to 4 hours meeting. So the same, we are conducting some of the meetings in person, but most of the meetings are conducted virtually. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Zazai. And I think I need to wrap up because we're really already over time. I mean, we heard Ian Mitchell remind us that not everything is okay during the last 10 years since Busan. We haven't all walked the talk in terms of implementing and applying the effectiveness principles. We have heard, but we've also heard some good news from some of our panelists reminding us that actually in response to the COVID crisis, there has been a quick reaction by some of the development partners, mobilization of funds, mobilization of support. What we have also been reminded is how important it is to make sure that the sustainable development remains and becomes a social contract with the people, and that means that multi-stakeholder partnerships are key. It means that civil society, that the people have to be around the table. We heard very vividly also from Mr. Mugabe, who was saying, giving us an example there. And we were reminded by Ms. Watkinson that it is really key to integrate innovation and local solutions in this response. So if we want an effective response that moves us forward from this crisis, we need to unlock the creativity and the sense of initiative of local communities, of local actors, and that is also one of the purposes of development cooperation, and certainly an indicator of whether it's effective or not. So I want to close by thanking all the panelists and also our key speakers at the beginning of the event. Thank you, merci, Monsieur Daniel Pembe, Mozango, Madame Schroeder-Fox, I've already thanked, Mr. Ian Mitchell, Mr. Gerald Mugabe, Mr. Farid Aziz, Mr. Yazin Zazai, Madame Megan Watkinson. Thank you so much to everyone who has participated and who has listened in to this discussion. And I wish you a wonderful end of the day in Asia and a wonderful day in the West. Thank you for being part of this important discussion moving forward. Thank you.